I'll go ahead and get us started here. My name is Sarah Boston. I am the Director of Programming at Music Workshop, and I'm so excited for our third webinar today. So thank you so much for joining us. You're the early adopters, and we really appreciate it. So today I have with me my colleague, Dr. Giuliana Conti, who is the Director of Equity and Education for Music Workshop. And I also have Lesley Moffat, who is a friend of mine. We actually play in Formation Wind Band together in Seattle, which is our all-female wind ensemble, 82 women strong, I think. And also she and I just more recently adjudicated a high school band festival together. So I know her just from floating around the Seattle area. And so I will give each of them a chance here in just a minute to kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their backgrounds. But let me go ahead and just do um, a couple more nuts and bolts here. So I've directed you to the top right, the view feature where you can change your view. So hopefully you can see us as well as hear us. I want to direct you to the chat at the bottom of your screen, which most people have figured out. And that is just for everyone. You're welcome to ring in at any point, and I'll keep an eye on it. The other thing I wanted to direct you to that's down near the chat, just a little bit over to the right of the chat, is the Q&A feature, which is where you can ask your questions, because we are going to take a few minutes at the end of this to see if you have any questions for Lesley, for Giuliana, and we will get to those. The cool thing about the Q&A is that you can upvote. So if someone puts a question in there that you're also interested in getting the answer to, you can bump that one up to the top of the list. So we'll be checking that out. I encourage you, please put your questions in the Q&A as we're going along. You do not have to wait until the end. If you see a slide with a term, or if Lesley mentions something and you just want to hear more about it, please go ahead and pop your question in there and we will get to it after the presentation. So final nut and bolt is just at the very end of our presentation today. In the last 5 minutes, I will be putting a survey, a link to the survey in the chat. It's only a few questions. It should take you about 2 minutes to fill it out. The main important reason for that for you is so that you can make sure that we have your name and email address so that we can send you your certificate of completion after this course is over. You can turn that over to your administrator or your school district in hopes of getting 1 clock hour. And Colin should have 3 clock hours after all of these webinars. We will also have a handout for you. Giuliana is going to go through some initial slides here with a lot of information on those slides, and we are going to give that to you as a handout afterwards. So don't feel like you have to absorb it all in one go. So I think that kind of wraps it up for me. Let me actually just turn it over to Lesley to introduce herself, and then we'll let Giuliana introduce herself, and then Giuliana will get us all warmed up with some vocab and some self-reflection. So Lesley.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Lesley Moffat, and this is my 37th year as a band director. Spent more than 30 of those years doing high school band. Now I teach middle school band, and I'm like a super big band nerd. I have written a couple books about being a band director. I host the Band Director Boot Camp podcast, and I'm the daughter of a band director and the granddaughter of an orchestra teacher. So this is in my blood, and I love what I do, but I got to the point where it was killing me at one point. So we're going to talk about that today.
Giuliana,
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yep. Anyways, technical challenges here with the menu bar. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. My name is Dr. Giuliana Conti, and I have my PhD in music education, and I specialize in research, especially on music learning through music listening and the intersection of culture, identity, music, and child development. So I just love talking about teaching music students, and I taught music in K-8, mostly K-5 for about 5 years, and have the great privilege of being the Director of Education and Equity here with Music Workshop. So we're really excited to have you. And for anyone who is tuning in through the recording of this session, we would like to encourage you to also just, as you take notes, write down any questions you may have, and you can also reach out to us with those questions. We are here for our teachers, especially on the topic of teacher well-being, which is a passion point for many of us. And I'm excited to talk about this with Lesley, who has written 2 books and has just a whole slew of experience for us to learn from. So a little bit about the presentation, and thank you, Sarah, for the introductions. A little bit about the presentation. So again, make sure that you're adding questions as we go along. We may be able to answer them in the moment. We will definitely get to them by the end. And we're going to start with identifying teacher challenges. I have some vocabulary I think that's really important for helping us figure out what is it that as individuals we might be struggling with in our teaching. And then what are some boundaries that can help? Following that will be Lesley's time with you, where she's going to talk about her own personal experience with teaching and well-being, especially the physical toll that teaching can take, and her method called the Empowered Method, which I think is just a really lovely acronym for you to remember, at which point we're going to go into some Q&A. And as I head into these next slides, as Sarah mentioned, they are chock full of information. I am not going to read them word for word, but I am giving you a handout so that you have it for reference. The idea being, I just want to plant some thoughts into your mind around what some barriers might be and some boundaries that we can use, and then for you to investigate on your own time after to really sink into that material and figure out what next steps you want to take. So first, let's talk about what mental health is. It is an emotional, psychological, and social form of well-being. It affects how we think, feel, act, make choices, and relate to others. So I know that this might be a hot button topic, but just to make sure that we're covering our bases, this is the definition that we are using to operate under for this presentation. One concept that I learned about when I was researching teacher well-being is mental and emotional hygiene. And I found it really surprising that for as much as we might brush our teeth, brush our hair, shower, do these things that really care for our bodies, we can do the same thing for our minds. And it's actually a research concept and part of our own hygiene that we need to maintain and manage and take care of over time. So if you were to stop and think about what is my mental hygiene like, that might be a great first discussion with yourself about how do you take care of yourself and how aware are you of even some of the daily things that we should be doing to take care of ourselves. And one of the challenges that really first comes up for teachers quite frequently is emotional dysregulation. And so for teachers who are especially used to being in control of and managing classrooms filled with students and topics for learning, and especially for music teachers, you've got performances, you've got multiple ensembles, and for our general educators, you may have multiple subjects, and you've got grading, and you've got projects. It's a lot to manage. And so it's easy for us to get dysregulated where we don't feel like we have a sense of control over our own emotions, and then they start to control us. And that can be a great place for some insight in what is it that my emotional dysregulation is doing to my mind, to my body, to my social interactions, to whether or not I take care of myself mentally, hygienically. These are all areas to start considering when we talk about teacher well-being, because one of the first things we need to do is identify what are our barriers. So let's take a look at a few last terms, and this is going to be in that handout for you, so I might blast through it. The first one is going to be emotional labor. Now, you might be familiar with this concept, but what I really want teachers to think about is how much energy they're putting into others. And for emotional labor, especially, that's going to include stress, worry, fatigue, and emotional labor. Stress, worry, fatigue, and emotional energy put in the form of labor. And that could even be what you're thinking about, how much time you spend thinking about a student you're worried about, or maybe how your class is going and whether or not the students in your school are adequately taken care of, a lot of those subconscious thoughts can, over time, cause burnout, and they can have a negative effect on your overall well-being because we may not be managing how much we worry and stress about things outside of our control. Next, we have burnout. And for teachers, we know that this is an important topic today, especially after COVID. And so for all the teachers that are in classrooms and doing the hard work, it's definitely an important consideration. And how do you take care of yourself in order to not just avoid burnout, but to thrive? There's a very big difference between, are we trying to be just okay versus are we trying to excel? Are we trying to walk into our job feeling happy and excited? And burnout is one of those things to look out for, especially when you think about the symptoms of poor diet, poor sleep patterns, maybe some headaches are coming on, or if you get agitated quickly with other people. Those can be signs of burnout. And it is different than depression. And so that's definitely, if this feels like it resonates with you, that's something to talk to your doctor about. That's something to start to look into, because they are different concepts, but they are relatable. Next, chronic stress. So this is something that can definitely be felt in your body, which can include aches and pains, again, for sleep, or maybe you're stepping away from your social life a little bit more because you feel like you're exerting too much energy on worrying about your students, on worrying about whether you're going to reach your milestones in class, worrying about whether you're going to even reach your own personal milestones given the load that you have to manage at work. So chronic stress can lead to burnout. It can lead to depression. And it's something that can be identified by looking at changes in your own behavior. Maybe are you leaning on a glass of wine too many nights a week? Are you looking at fast, maybe unhealthy food just to get yourself through the day because you've occupied your mind so much with worrying about your students and being pulled in many directions by your classes? And then this can also lead to compassion fatigue. So some teachers might find themselves emotionally burnt out, where they don't find they've got much compassion left for students who are struggling, or even their own friends and family. If you find that you're limited in how much you can really offer others, that you surprise yourself by not being as empathetic towards others when normally you would, that is a sign of compassion fatigue, where your patience is lowered, the amount of empathy you feel towards others is lowered. And that can often come as a result of being a very caring, compassionate person who is in a teaching position or in a personal position where you are feeling compassionate towards others so much that you run out of it, like you have not much left to give. And that's also an area to look at, to think about, what is it that I can do maybe to take a break, to find ways to take care of myself, rehabilitate myself, and then come back to other people in my life with more energy. But one thing that we definitely believe in is you have to take care of yourself first. You have to put on your own oxygen mask before you can care for others. And if you find that you're not able to care for others much, then you might be struggling with compassion fatigue. Lastly, secondary and vicarious trauma. So especially for teachers in Title I schools, and especially for teachers who are struggling with epidemics of school violence, and the threat of school shootings is one topic in particular that can cause secondary and vicarious trauma. When you work in an environment that is inherently problematic or toxic, you can become traumatized by your students' traumas, especially if you find that there's patterns of neglect or social emotional challenges with your students or their families. A lot of teachers can find that the more that they care, the more they feel traumatized by what they care about. And that can also lead to burnout, depression, and these challenges can follow us for decades if not interrupted and managed and dealt with. And so I would always recommend professionals, psychological professionals, health professionals of any kind, to help identify maybe what are your greatest challenges as a teacher, what might be tipping you off toward the burnout scale, and then what can you do as a result as an intervention for yourself or some self-care strategies, which I know that Lesley's going to talk us through. So the last thing I want to leave you with before I hand it over to Lesley is the idea of boundaries. And I think that's where you're going to find a lot of relief as you start to make changes for yourself as a teacher in the direction of healthy and the direction of happy and thriving. Because again, we don't want to just be okay, or we don't want to aim for not suffering. We want to thrive because that's the best side of us that our students get when we're a happy teacher. So some boundaries with other people to consider is saying yes to yourself before you say yes to others, and especially when it comes to your time. I know that teachers are asked to volunteer for things left and right, or join committees, or even if it's paid, it's another commitment. Really think about whether or not that time should be spent with you or with others, and consider saying no. Similarly, say no to invitations you're not interested in, or those that would deplete your time for self-care. And this can be very difficult for music teachers in particular who've got performance schedules that take them outside of school hours. Are all of those competitions you're signing up for your students necessary? Are those trips all necessary? What are ways that you can talk with your students, talk with your administrators to make sure that your commitments are within a reasonable amount of work hours per week or per month? What works for you as a teacher to show up as your best self? Similarly, say no to working for others, especially if it's unpaid. If you are a yes person, I am a reformed yes person, said yes to everything. I think I found myself in 25 committees once, and I was just, I don't know how I did it. I know a lot about committees though. And if I could tell myself anything from that period of time, it would have been say no, just say no. I know it is uncomfortable, but part of getting used to boundaries is being okay with other people's discomfort when you set them. And that's just hard. And you just need to practice it. Similarly, take space from people who are negatively influencing your mood. If you find that some people are energy vampires, take a break from them. And you can tell them why. You don't have to. You don't owe anyone an answer. These are your boundaries for your own well-being. And then tell people what you need from them, including using statements like, I need you to stop. Especially with students, they need boundaries. They need to know what your boundaries are at the beginning of the school year and for the rest of the school year. This is a great opportunity to practice setting boundaries with adults by using these statements with students. Lastly, boundaries with yourself. Rest when you need it, sleep when you need it, stay at work until a certain time and then go home if you need that separation, or bring your work home if you need a separation from the school environment. Figure out what that balance is. Put time on your calendar for catch-up work, for emails, even text messages. Prioritize a hobby that feeds your interests. And if you really need to delete social media apps from your phone and access them on the computer, these are examples of ways that you can draw boundaries with yourself so that you're also following your own advice and interests. And again, these are all going to be on the handout that's coming your way. So you'll have twice as many of the boundaries and some self-care tips as well. This all comes down to the idea that you have to put your oxygen mask on first. And sometimes that's going to mean take the day off. The world isn't going to burn down if you do, but you might if you don't. So make sure that you are caring for yourself, because one day could really make the difference. That might start with evaluating your current self-care practices, which I know that Lesley's going to give you some insight into, and then especially setting boundaries to make space for your own self-care so that your students can have a teacher who's able to cultivate well-being for them as well. So on that note, I am very excited to hand it over to Lesley Looks like we don't have any questions so far. So if you do, of course, put them into the Q&A, and Sarah can drop in that file sometime by the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for your time and consideration on these ideas, and I hope that you take some time after this webinar to look at different ways that you can support yourself. Lesley, I'd love to pass it off.
Awesome. I think I just screen shared. Did I do that right? Or did I just take yours away? I was going to ask first. Okay, it's working. Well, thanks. What you just talked about is all of it. I was just like, yep, yep, yep. So we're right on. And so I want to just talk about this in reality now, all these things that Giuliana has just spoken about. And I'm going to tell you why it's so important. So little history. This is me, 1973. So I was 8 years old at the time. My dad was sitting there in the chair. He was a high school band director. Our whole lives revolved around the high school band. We lived in the community. He was my director and stuff. So band has always been my life. And I always knew I was going to be a high school band director. Didn't matter that other women didn't do it or anything. My dad did it, so I was going to do it. And so I did. And there we are. This, I think, was 2012 or 2016. It was one of our 3 trips where my students performed at Carnegie Hall, and my dad came and he conducted the first number on each of those concerts. And so that was really cool. So again, just this whole music has just been an obsession, if you will, with me. And I wanted to build an amazingly big program and do all the things. And so by 2017, I had a program where I had 300 band students in it at that point. We had 4 jazz bands. We had 5 concert groups and 2 percussion ensembles. And I damn near died. It was not healthy for me. Probably not for my students either, because I wanted band to be their whole life too. But what it did for me is I didn't do what Giuliana said. Nobody told me, take time for yourself or to make sure you're healthy or anything like that. Because it was all about back in the 1980s when I was in college, teaching us how we can serve our students, how we can serve our schools, and how we can serve our communities. Well, look where that led me. In July of 2017, before that, starting that April or May, I had a breakdown. I could not go to work anymore. I basically stayed at home for the rest of the school year. My dad took my students on their trip to Canada to perform at the festival. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make one more decision. I was tired and exhausted and beyond stress. By then I had had 12 major surgeries. I've got titanium rods and screws in my back and my neck and all kinds of places. I was falling apart. I was about 75 pounds heavier than I am now, which hurt my joints. I was in a lot of pain walking around with more on my body than was comfortable. I had restless leg syndrome, which meant my legs just wanted to kick all night, which makes sleeping hard. But when my mind was always thinking about school anyway, it wasn't like I was sleeping great anyhow. I was on 14 prescription pills a day, everything from ADHD meds to stuff to help me sleep at night, stuff to help my legs not move, stuff to keep me awake, stuff for depression, anxiety. I mean, I should be dead by now. And there were lots of nights that I probably shouldn't even admit to where a well-balanced meal for me looked like a bottle of wine in one hand and a glass in the other. I'd be too tired to do anything about it. And then I was taking all those pills and I was working 12 to 14-hour days with the high school. Our first class, how stupid is this? Jazz band started at 6:30 in the morning. Then I'd teach all day, then have the evening and afternoon stuff that goes on. And you know how it is, the basketball games, the football games, the parent meetings, the fundraisers, just all of it. And it broke me. And I thought I was going to have to walk away from teaching. But I had a little come to Jesus, well, a lot of them, with myself and my family and my doctors, and saying, what can I do? I love teaching still, but I can't keep doing it this way. And so I made some massive changes. And we're going to talk about those in a minute. And a year later, and it didn't happen overnight. You notice it doesn't say July to August, right? It was a process, and it's an ongoing process every single day. But by the time this had happened, in a year, I had so much energy. I felt so refreshed. I was even tempered. I was pain free because I was at a healthier weight. My body can carry the weight, and it doesn't hurt anymore. My legs don't kick because I learned that if I do certain things during the day, I can keep the legs from being so active at night. I went off all of the prescription pills I had been on for decades. Don't recommend doing that without doctor's help. I did every step with guided by medical professionals because it can be dangerous otherwise. But I felt the toxicity of the all of the pills all of the time and what that must have been doing to my body. The side effects, well. Anyway, so then I felt so much better, more focused. I sleep so well now, which is super important. And I become uber efficient at managing my time and my workload. So I can do this sustainably now. And that's why, whatever, I can't do the math, 7, 8 years, 6 years later, I'm still in the classroom teaching every day. And I feel so much different than I did back then. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how did I do that and what do I do with other people I teach and clients and stuff, the methods that work. So before we do that, I want you to think about just think of one way that you think your job impacts your physical health. Does it impact your sleep? Things hurt? Are you stressed out? Do you have headaches? Does your stomach get knots before you go in the classroom every day? Do you cry in the parking lot? Just what is it? Think about that. Because we're short on time, I won't be able to interact a ton with this, but I want your mind active on this. I know for me, well, I just shared all the physical things that happened with me. And then mental health. Again, Giuliana talked about this quite a bit, is the load we carry in our minds, the fatigue that goes with the decision making, the people in your face saying your name 10,000 times, and just all of it can be overwhelming. Maybe you can think, each of you, of a time or something that happens with you that's impacting your mental health, your inability to focus as much, whatever that looks like for you. For me, I had a lot of depression. I was anxious all the time, like I'm never good enough. Nothing I did was enough because they always wanted more. And so that really impacted my mental health a lot. And then relationships. I had Brian Koreski was one of the guests on my podcast not too long ago. I guess it was a while ago, but he talked about his obsession or devotion to his job ended up costing him a 30-year marriage. His wife had finally said, it's me or the job, and he stayed in the job. And we talked about that, about the strain it puts with not just your partners, but your kids too. I look back and I even felt it at the time, like, am I being a good enough mom? Because I always felt like if I was at school, I was not a good enough mom. If I was home with my kids, I wasn't good enough teacher. So I just always felt like I was never good enough. Maybe some of you can relate to that, or to the relationships that get impacted when your friends want to go hang out and do things and you're like, I just can't. I can't even get off the couch. That's hard. People stop calling. So we talked a minute, or one of you talked about the Empower method that I created. So first of all, I didn't create something and then get healthier. What I did is I went through a lot of work. A lot of doctors have been moving into naturopathic medicine and some alternative things besides what I'd been using. And then I got a lot healthier. And then I looked back, like, how the heck did I do that? Because people are like, what did you do? How did you do it? And so I sat down and ended up writing a book because I really broke down, what did I do? How did I do it? And how can I help other people do this? And then I came up with the very clever name, Power Method, because I realized there were really 4 main areas in my life that I put most of my energy into that had the biggest impact. And I thought, those are the big things. It's a mindful approach to meals, movement, and music, hence all the M's. Those were the 4 areas where, when I made those the center of what I did, the change has been amazing. I'm almost 60 years old and I feel better than I did in my 30s and 40s. So let me share what those look like. So the mindfulness. Now, some of you are all thinking, oh, this is woo-woo, we're going to sit and meditate. It's more than that. It's being mindful. For example, after COVID, I became very mindful when I'd pull into my parking lot at school every day at the high school where I had taught for 20 years. I'd pull in and my stomach would be in knots. Like, I'd feel the physical stuff. Sometimes I would cry in my car before going in. I thought, I was mindful of the fact that this isn't healthy. Something's not okay anymore. And what it was is, I realized after getting a counselor and everything, I built up this program in our community. I mean, it was huge. It was awesome and amazing. COVID comes along and it just felt like the bottom fell out. And I know y'all can relate. I wasn't the only one. But to go back in that classroom and think, I have to start again. I had built it from under 100 to more than 300. I still had the kids, but after a year and a half out of the building, it was so different. I didn't want to be that teacher that everybody else would be going, oh man, she should have left. So I became mindful of the fact that for my own well-being and for my students, it was time for me to maybe consider what other options would be out there. Turns out, after a lot of soul searching and spending $10,000 on a company to help me find a job outside of education, I got a aha moment when I went to the middle school band concert. We share a campus, high school, middle school. Went to that concert in June, And the next morning I went to the director and I said, hey, you want to swap jobs? And literally it was that easy. I moved to my feeder middle school because I was mindful of the high school stuff. Just I couldn't keep doing it anymore because of that. That that made it suddenly it was a huge change. So that awareness as we as any whatever you're experiencing, or even as your time goes on, being mindful of where am I in this stage of life. When my kids were little, it would have been a different thing. But so being mindful of how things are impacting your life, paying attention to those kinds of things instead of just going through life not paying attention to things. If I hadn't picked up on those signs of like the knot in the stomach and the need or the urge to cry all the time, I might not have recognized that I needed the change and that it was healthier for me to move. So it took a lot of soul searching because I thought I was going to retire from that school. I was like, oh, I felt let down, but it all worked out. Don't worry. And then it's taking this mindful approach to the other pieces we're going to talk about. The first being meals. I learned that the food I eat impacts how I feel. And here's the sad part. I freaking love bread and pasta and all things. My body doesn't produce or doesn't deal with gluten very well. And when I cut it out, I was a little crabby for a while, I'm not going to lie. But man, I felt better. And I'm a control freak. I'm not going to lie. Anybody else out there control freaks? Come on, I know you are because we're music teachers. That's what we do. So I was like, wow, I could start to feel better. I get to control what I eat. And yes, it's hard to give up that. But then I started finding all these foods that made me feel really good. And I started finding the ones that didn't. And by making some changes in what I ate, had remarkable impact on my body. I learned about how grains can grain brain they call it, where the impact it has on that and on weight. I mean, I learned a lot of things. And then I started making choices that helped me start to feel better. I accidentally lost 75 pounds in the process. I have easily maintained that because I like feeling good. And so now I like eating the foods that help me feel good instead of make me want to pass out on the couch and feel like shit. I'm sorry, probably not appropriate to say that. Okay. So anyway, the meals I ate have become almost an obsession. They became like an obsession at first, like what can I do? Now that I know the foods to help, it's just remarkable. So that's a huge tool. America does not make it easy for us to eat in a way that helps us. Okay. I gave up processed foods. God, that made a huge difference. I don't do fast foods anymore. For me, other people have different needs though. You know, it's like an IEP. You need your own IEP. What do you need for specific things for you? So you got to do that work and figure out for you, how can you use meals to support your health? Not what can you take away, but what can support you? What helps you think better? What helps you, feel physically better in those things? So that's part of the M piece. Movement. I moved around in my job a lot at school, off the podium, on the podium, back to the percussion to yell at them for something, back to the podium, those kinds of things. But serious movement, like to isolate in my body to do the things that I needed to do, I hadn't really thought of because from the time I was in middle school, I had had huge issues with my back. And so I was strapped into this stupid back brace and it went around my arms and under my legs. And I wore it all through middle school and high school. Didn't feel awkward at all. But I had been told by doctors in the 1970s, ooh, just don't move a lot. Get out of PE, don't do any sports. So I thought I shouldn't do that. We all know now that was really terrible advice. But I began to learn through my husband actually is the one that said, let's go to a yoga class. I'm like, well, that sounds dumb, right? But we went because I didn't seem like not like it would be enough movement to do anything. Let me tell you, holding a plank for 5 seconds, I was dripping sweat. I was like, oh my gosh. And then Shavasana at the end, where you lie still and it's all integrating in your body. That first time I was there, I was like, my eyes were open. I'm looking back and forth, like, look, I got things to do. I don't have time for this. It was hard for me to learn to be still. But then I started taking control of doing the yoga, doing walking on a regular basis, and doing things that started like lubricating my joints, like valve oil does for a trumpet. And the pain that I was taking all the pain pills for, I'd lost weight, so it didn't hurt my joints, and I was moving enough. I have more flexibility now than I ever had in my entire life because I learned how to move my body in ways that feel really good and that help me. Like today, I fell off my podium at school today. I've never done that in 37 years. I turned around and did something and fell down, but I caught myself and did not get hurt because the muscles in my body and I had the reflexes that supported me. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. I would have fallen and I would have been calling 911. It would have been a mess. So finding a movement that makes you feel good is important, not a movement that makes me feel good. My husband plays ice hockey. I'm not doing that. You can go do all that. So he has different needs. Again, you have different needs. Find movement that feels good so that you want to do it. Maybe you play pickleball. I don't know, dance, get a dog, take him for a walk, something. And then music. Now I'm talking to music teachers right there. You guys get the power of music on so many levels. Playing music, which, as Sarah mentioned, we're both in the Formation Wind Band, an all women's band, which is totally cool. But I spent more than 25 years not playing my trombone on the other side of the podium because I didn't have time. And I forgot how much music nourishes my soul as a performer. And so I had let that go. I played piano for lots of events, but I hadn't played in a band. And doing that again has been amazingly good. But something else I have discovered over the past 5 years that is crazy amazing is music is vibration. Everything vibrates. That's just how life works. And so what I've learned to do is there are different energy centers in our body that vibrate differently, that affect our organs, that affects how we think, how everything happens. Bodies being mostly water, whatever vibrations going on, our bodies pick up on that and will start resonating. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I listen to specific frequencies. Like I'll put my phone on in my pocket when I'm walking around, or at night when I sleep, that are specifically made to do things like relax or help your mind work. Like if you want to concentrate more. And it's not music that you'll get distracted conducting along or singing along to, but these are vibrations and frequencies that help center or help work with our bodies. And so I've explored this a lot more than I even had when I had written my first book. And I'm finding so many healing qualities with music. And how we can use it from playlists. If you needed it to get fired up, you can use it for that too. So thinking about how do you as a musician use music and how can music support you in your wellness? Doesn't take time away from my busy schedule to cook dinner with a vibration playing or a different frequency playing. It's just a nice, pleasant background sound. And it's happening while I'm getting other things done, but I feel my body relax. I use 528 hertz in my classroom with my students every day. I put that on the stereo, and it's related to our heart chakra if you're into any of that. And what it does is my students have been trained the minute they hear that, they just their body response is to relax. And then I walk them through a breathing exercise. But I use music to literally bring my kids kind of focused and in. And we take all that chaos that comes into the room, and it's just like, and I attribute a lot of that to that consistent frequency being they've trained themselves, just like you train them to play a B flat scale. You train their bodies to do certain things. So use magic or music. It's magical. It's magical in so many more ways than I ever used to understand. And then there's this, but I don't have time. Okay. I know you're all raising your hand saying that because I used to do seminars and I go on my little hoity toity. Oh, and you all need to do this and exercise or movement and meals. And then people afterwards would be like, that'd be great. I just can't. I don't have time. So it wouldn't be very useful if I just told you, here's what you should do, but I know you can't. So I'm going to talk about, I call them my SNAP strategies in my first book, Start Now and Progress SNAP. And so what they are is little ways to start training you to train your mind or your body to make changes. They're not even related to like changes you'd want to make life ways. It's learning to make changes so that when you want to make the big changes, it's easier. So if you don't have time for self-care, I want to give you an idea of how you could practice something to just make a change, to start becoming more mindful of some things and just see what this could look like for you. So thinking about however you feel when you're eating your, that other slide shouldn't have been there. That was from another presentation. Sorry. Can you cut that out before you do the replay? Anyway, for meals, that piece, try maybe tonight during dinner, eat your meal with your non-dominant hand. That's going to force you to slow down. It's going to force you to be more mindful. And oh, how do I hold the knife and cut with this? And and guess what? You're not thinking about your emails when you do that. Your mind is going to be more fully present. Or brush your teeth tonight with your opposite hand. Just simply doing that's going to break the circuit, because if normally when you brush your teeth, is your to-do list going through your mind? Or so, I mean, you've got these patterns where you've done it. Just start breaking the patterns before you start adding new things. This won't add, you don't have to have a 30-minute routine. No, just eat your dinner with a different hand or something. See what that's like. See what your brain does during that. Just observe. That's the mindful piece. Observe that and then just be curious. And one of the things, if you honestly are trying to eat healthier or lose weight, doing this paces your eating differently, because you're using your non-dominant hand, you'll tend to slow down, and that's better for us anyway. So give it a shot if you're looking at a way to do that. Movement. You're like, I don't have time to go to a gym. So before I have each of my cups of coffee every day, I do a set of push-ups. I do 15 or 25 push-ups now. I I had no upper body strength when I started this, and I started on April 1st a couple years ago. And so I'm like, I got to get the upper body strength. After I lost my weight, I had jiggly arms when I conducted, and I did not like that. But I was like, I got to do the push-up thing. Oh, you guys, the first time I did one push-up, and I thought I was going to die. I'm not being over dramatic either. And then on April 2nd, I did 2 push-ups. They were both really hard. And April 3rd, I did a 3rd push-up or 3. And as each day went, it was like, whoa, they're still hard, but they're not as hard. I was building up muscle and endurance much faster than I had anticipated. So on April 15th, man, I did 15 push-ups. And the morning of April 16th, I'm like, there is not any way on this planet that I'm going to do 16 push-ups. I just can't. I knew 15 was my limit. So I did a set of 15. And then when I got my next cup of coffee, I did another set of 15. Suddenly I'd done 30 push-ups on April 16th. Well, about a week later, I added another set. And by the end of the month, I was doing 60 push-ups in 4 manageable sets of 15 in a month. But if I had tried to start with 60 push-ups on April 1st, well, that would have been my last day. So think about how you can do something, start a habit, itty bitty, teeny tiny. And like, again, while I was waiting for coffee to brew, because it's an espresso, right? So I have to brew each cup of coffee. So while that's happening, I was just killing time anyway. Hold a plank, do a push-up, do something that feels stretch, do something, put your movement in another task you're already doing. And then finally, music. You might want to incorporate it, like I was saying earlier, playlists, or maybe you want to learn more about how to get healing and grounded. You can email me. I'll send you a list that has all the different frequencies that say, if you want to do this, here's some frequency links, and I got all that. But trying to use music as a way to help you stay grounded, or to feed your soul, to nurture that musician in you that might get put aside when you're helping, as a teacher, because that's a very different experience than being the performing musician. So figure out how you can keep music in your life. I know I went a minute over, so I just will go super quick here. I just want to invite any of you out there to join the crowd out here, my band director boot camp audience. We have a podcast there, and I talk about productivity and wellness tips for busy band directors, and really for anybody who's a music teacher. It's through the lens of music teachers here. So if you're looking for some 20-minute tidbits, because we know your time is busy, we got lots of stuff, and almost every guest that comes on gives away a lot of free stuff in the show notes. So stop on by and visit us. And then I'll love to give this away. Here's a cookbook that I did. And if you use ChatGPT, I've written prompts in this cookbook. All you got to do is copy and paste. It will do your meal planning. You can tell it what your budget is, or how many meals to plan. If you have picky eaters in your family, then it will make it'll give you ideas. You can say, I love this. Now give me recipes for all those. And then now make my shopping list, and it will sort it by all of like produce and meat and blah, blah, blah. Easy peasy. I even tell it to check the big board market, town and country market, and use any of the things on there, so that when I go shopping, it's planning meals around what's the meat, for example, that's on sale, so that it can, and it's easy. It takes just minutes. So take advantage of this. You can get a free download. So, and it's almost easier than the hard copy book, because you can just copy and paste right out of the PDF you'll get, put that in, and then you can make it your own too. Because you can say, if you're gluten-free or whatever, you can just customize it to your heart's content. I do this every Sunday at my house. My life is so much easier, and it helps with the meals, and it saves me time. And I don't I don't waste money on food we don't eat. So anyway, I hope you find that helpful. And I think that was my last one. Oh, that was that. We don't need to see that. I'll turn it over
Oh,
to
I put that
you.
in there for you.
Huh?
Yeah, no, go back, Leslie.
Oh, okay.
I want to
Plug your
show
book.
off
Take a minute.
your
Take a minute.
books.
Plug your book. Yeah.
So I talk about ChatGPT. You guys, if you're not using AI, I've got free stuff on that too. It saves time. It saves a boatload of time. And I had my headshots here, and I was awkwardly growing out my hair, and you might be able to see that line. It used to be brown on the bottom. I used AI to fix my hair color, so I didn't have to get fresh headshots. So as I grew out my hair, now the ends are still down here. But anyway, AI is
That's brilliant.
So.
Well, and I just have to say that I love the title of your book. I love my job, but it's killing me. I love teaching for grad school, but also because I saw my burnout impending. And, it really can affect teacher at any part of their career. And talking about chronic stress, illness, I think is really important in breaking that stigma against teachers who do need to take time for themselves. And we know from our music teachers that it's one of the greatest challenges is having a music program where you don't have any room to fall behind. So you just stick through it and you don't take time off. You don't take care of yourself. And you're just so much more valuable than that. And your
Yeah.
students
For
deserve
yourself, your family, your
healthy
students, all of
you.
it.
Yeah, for sure. So I just wanted to put these books out there because I think that they're totally worth your time. And thank you so much, Lesley, for all of this.
Yeah.
Lesley, these are hard copies, but you have ebooks as well. Is that right?
Yes, and audiobooks for those of you that prefer audio.
Fantastic.
It's funny because I had to laugh, Giuliana, because you talk about the oxygen mask. And in my first book, I used the put on your oxygen mask. And the gal that did the audiobook, I was listening back and she said, just like the FFA says, it's FAA, but she did
FA.
FFA, which is Future Farmers of America. I
That's
don't
what,
think they're talking about it. So if you listen to my book, oops.
They believe strongly in oxygen masks.
yeah.
Get them on those cows. Okay.
Okay, it looks like we have some amazing questions here.
Yeah, so I was actually going to go to let's see, Colin. I love he accidentally wrote for the end of time,
I
meaning
saw
for
that.
the end
I
is time.
resonated with
But
it.
sometimes it feels like the end of time when you're that stressed out. He says he has chronic migraines, started 10 years ago, when he started teaching. Relates to Leslie's story. Loves his job, but the pain has sometimes been unbearable for him. Says he's good with self-care outside of school, but in the moment in school, classroom management, behaviors, all that stress sets in. Any tips for self-care, literally in the moment teaching? This is just so interesting to me as well as a former teacher myself. He's like, I want a lifelong career, but the pain, anxiety, stress is taking away from so much of my life.
Definitely. I'm going to pass it off to Lesley right after this. In what we're sharing with you in that handout is a list of what you can see on the screen, which is recommendations for self-care and mental hygiene. And you'll see that we've broken it down into 4 different categories with some concrete recommendations for at home and at school. So definitely take a look at that and see if there's anywhere to start with. And especially music. If you're in the music classroom, can you guide your students through something musical that is self-care for you, calms them down, maybe quiets them for a moment, is still musical, but is, without them knowing, prioritizing your need for a pause? And that would be my first thing to say.
It's interesting because like in the moment, if I need to, my kids know that if they see me like just go, I'll literally stop and do a breath and I'll tell them, I'll just say I'm overloaded. I literally will tell my kids so that, and I'll say, let's all take a breath together sometimes. Because like I said here, my self-care, the whole reason I started this, it's about a 4-minute routine every day at the beginning of class. I walked into my classroom that year. I had missed the end of the school year and then all summer had gone by and then school started in September. And when I walked in my room, my kids didn't recognize me. They're like, Miss Moffat? I mean, I looked different and my energy was different. It was a whole different person. And so I was super upfront with them because I knew I was writing a book and that if anybody wants to know anything about me now, it's like whatever. So I was really upfront with my kids and I said, you a lot of you have commented on the change that you've noticed. And I said, I was really not doing well last year. There were a lot of factors and I didn't give them all the details, but I did say one of the medications I had been on was for ADHD. And in my body, it was time to not use it anymore because that was the right call for me. I made it real clear. None of them needed to stop their medicines. I was not doing that. But when I talked about it, I said, I still have ADHD. And each class comes in here and all of you have instruments and 45 minutes later you leave and 50 more kids come in with instruments and it's overwhelming to me and it's overload and it's hard. And so I want to be the best teacher I can be for you. And since I missed all that school last year and during the summer, I learned some strategies. But one of the strategies, like every hour or so, I just need to recenter so I can do my job. I can't leave and go do that. Would you guys do this with me so that I can keep teaching? And they didn't like having subs for the whole end of the last school year. I mean, so I had to get their buy-in. And I said, it's going to feel weird at first. And I modified it throughout. And so now it's just an automatic, it's a 4-minute thing. They hear the sound and all, but we figured it out together. And by doing that, I equate that with the kids come in your classroom. It's like having a snow globe that you've shaken and shaken, right? Each one of them's that the pieces of glitter flying around, and you're trying to be clear in the center. They're like, hey, here's what we're doing today. Let's all get going. But it's just really hard to get everything going. You can't instantly get that stuff to settle down, right? It takes time. Just gravity has to work. Once you set the snow globe down, after just a minute or two. And so that's the same thing with the students. Is I tell them, I say, you guys come in here just like that, and just like a snow globe, we're going to settle our energy in. And it's really like tuning instruments. I'm attuning them to one another. And so that is in a way using music, but I'm straight up, I tell them I'm doing it. I do it with them every day. And then if we need, we as a class, or if I, like that time when I'll just say it, I'm not supposed to talk about it, but I'm going to do it anyway. I had an incident in my classroom a couple of weeks ago. It was a fake gun, but I didn't know it at the time. My heart began racing. Automatically though, because I practiced the breath work, I felt my body start to do a deep breath before I even confronted the issue. And then I said to my students after it was done, I said, my heart's racing. I need to take a breath. You guys want to breathe with me? And we all did that. And we had done that 30 minutes before in class. And so it really quickly helped them center in. But that's a tool that we have. And I tell them point blank, I am teaching you how to use a tool to relax your brain and body. We call it brain and body tuning. This tool will help you if you're working on a test, if you're nervous for whatever it is. And so it began as self-care that I then shared with my student. And I always say to them, I'm not going to teach you something that's not going to be helpful. And so I've gotten a lot of buy-in. That's been my go-to. So really, and then sometimes we'll use music. We've used it when we've been sad. We've done different, let's play a song because we're feeling really sad when we had a student death and we were trying to cope. So we've used music in that way. But for the most part, I have a daily routine that kind of centers us. I hope
But it
I
sounds like
answered your question.
you're also being open and honest with your students, which I think is a really important and vulnerable piece here, because I know that when I was honest with my students, when I was not having a good day, they were catching each other from saying things or doing things, and they became rallied behind me and the class as a community and as a family. And I think that's a really important piece, because I would like teachers to normalize stopping the class to do a breath activity or some type of musical thing, if that means that the teacher is now taking a moment to be okay, is being honest with not being okay. Students are learning from that example, and now music is becoming a tool for regulation.
I agree so much with that, Juliana, and I have talked about this a number of times about how we sort of have always operated from a very honest place with our students. Of course, making considerations for student developmental levels, and there's no need to overshare, but when you are just sharing who you are or what you're going through, it helps your students to see you as human, as not a robot, as not someone who just like lives at the school. You're a human being with feelings, and that just goes so far in the classroom. We're already doing stuff as a team. We're already making music together. We're having that communal experience. And then, you're just adding like another real layer to that as a team. I feel like we could sit here for another hour. I definitely could listen to Lesley for at least another hour. And I don't know that I've ever laughed so many times in a webinar, but this was so enjoyable. I hope that those of you who have joined us, or those of you who are watching this later, can pick up at least a few things that really resonate with you to help you. And just remember, as Lesley says, you can't do it all overnight. It's one little tiny thing that you change at a time, and over time it makes a big difference. At this point, if you have dropped another question in the chat and we didn't get to it, or sorry, in the Q&A, then please put it in the survey. There's a spot for that. I see someone who's asking a question about the 4-minute activity that you were talking about, wondering if that's in your books.
Yes, I write about it in the second book, which is Love the Job, Lose the Stress. And I think on my website, there's a free download that actually explains it and has a template if you want to do it yourself, so that you can, like a script of how to do it and how to make it your own for your kids. So and if you can't find it, email me. I'll put you on the right track. But I got a lot of stuff out there for free to just help yourself too.
So right now, I'm putting the survey in the chat. If you're looking for that certificate of completion, please put your name and your email address in there. We also have a few other questions for you, just wanting to know if we made a difference today, if you learned something, if you're thinking about coming back or recommending us, and maybe what other topics you might like to see. I'll put in a plug for next month's webinar, which we'll be putting out in our newsletter and putting on our website and on our social media. It's happening Monday, November 18th, same time, same place, and it is with Dr. Jason Rawls, aka Jay Rawls, DJ and producer and assistant professor of hip hop at The Ohio State University. He's going to be joining us to talk about teaching hip hop in the classroom. He's one of our advisors for our hip hop course that's coming out momentarily, so that's definitely something you won't want to miss. I'm also in 12 seconds going to drop the handout from Giuliana's slides in the chat for you if you'd like to have that as well. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, taking the time to watch this. We love our teachers. We see you, we hear you, we want to support you, and we love what you're doing. Please let us know if we can assist you with anything. You're welcome to stay on here for a couple of minutes if there's anything else you want to drop in the chat for Lesley Moffat. But until then, I hope your students are as sweet to you as all the candy they're going to be imbibing tomorrow, which is Halloween. Good luck. Thank you so
They're
much.
gonna bounce off those walls.
Thank you, Giuliana, and thank you, Lesley, for joining us. Everybody have a good
Thank you, Leslie.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting
Thank
me.
you, Sarah. Thanks
Thanks
everyone
for
for
showing up, everybody.
joining.